Committee will now come to order. We will start our unanticipated third panel. Appreciate the two of you being here to answer questions before this committee. It is my understanding, having worked with both sides and my understanding from the two of you who I have yet to speak with, that should this panel run short, that is, members not be allowed to fully ask all the questions that we have here today, that you both will personally agree to come back and participate in another hearing as a follow-up. We'll call this Part 1 of Part 1 of this hearing, and I would hope and expect that the two of you would also be able to attend that second hearing. We'll come to it by mutual agreement in terms of the date. It will be your own panel, so you're not offended by anybody. Is that your understanding of how we're going to proceed? Mr. Caine.
Mr. Chairman, yes, it is.
Mr. Kerr.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
As long as we have the ranking member here and we have an understanding of how that's going to proceed, we will proceed. Mr. Lee Kerr is the Assistant Administrator for Security Operations at the TSA, and Mr. Robin Caine is the Assistant Administrator for Security Technology at the TSA. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses will be sworn in before they testify. If you please rise and raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Let the record reflect that all witnesses answered in the affirmative. In order to allow time for discussion, what we would ask is allow you to each take 5 minutes for your opening statements. Please adhere to the red light that will appear before you. We'll give you some leeway with that. Keep your comments to 5 minutes, and then we will allow you to submit any additional testimony that you're not able to give verbally into the record for the full committee. So at this time, we'll recognize first Mr. Caine for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Tierney, Ranking Member Cummings, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the Transportation Security Administration's risk-based, intelligence-driven approach to aviation security, and specifically the use of advanced imaging technology. As a Chief Technology Officer, I'll focus on the technical aspects, and our Director of Security Operations, Lee Kerr, will discuss the human aspect. Before going into more detail, let me state it clearly. The technology is vital to our nation's ability to keep air travelers safe in this post-9/11 world. Mr. Chairman, the United States faces a determined, creative enemy bent on the destruction of our way of life. The threat is everywhere. Last year, the FBI arrested a man planning an attack on the D.C. subway system. A few weeks ago, a young Saudi man was arrested under suspicion of plotting terror attacks in Texas as a lone wolf jihadist. And whether it was a failed attack on Christmas Day 2009, this disrupted cargo plot last October, or the latest intelligence we see every day, we know al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups continue to target our aviation system. Our security measures must focus on detecting and disrupting today's threat, not yesterday's. Today, we have a nimble aviation security system that deploys multiple layers of risk-based, intelligence-driven security measures. The checkpoint is a central piece of the puzzle, and one aspect of the checkpoint is what we're here to discuss today. Mr. Chairman, well-concealed, non-metallic, improvised explosive devices are now among the gravest threat to security. And while there is no silver bullet, AIT, the advanced imaging technology, gives us the best opportunity to detect these threats. We first piloted the advanced imaging technology in early 2007, knowing of these threats. Following testing and analysis, we began deploying the technology nationwide after the After the failed Christmas Day 2009 attack, we accelerated it. In our ongoing testing and development, we know that well-concealed devices like those used on Christmas Day 2009 can be detected by AIT. It is then up to the image operator to recognize the anomaly. Beyond effectiveness, there are two other issues I'll address: privacy and safety. AIT units in airports cannot store, print, or transmit images. The system will require different software to make this a possibility. Anonymity is also paramount. The officer reviewing the image does not see the passenger, and the officer assisting the passenger cannot see the image. AIT also does not produce photographic quality images that would permit personal identification. We are now testing auto detection software to further enhance privacy by eliminating passenger-specific images and instead highlighting anomalies on a generic outline. Testing is ongoing to ensure that this software provides the same detection capability as previous versions of the advanced imaging technology. Passengers appreciate it, and we hope to roll it out nationwide in the near future. On safety, This technology is safe for all passengers and employees. The radiation dose from backscatter advanced imaging technology machines has been independently confirmed by the Food and Drug Administration, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, Johns Hopkins University, and the U.S. Army, among others. All this testing confirmed that the radiation dose is well within established standards. As constructed, backscatter AIT is incapable of producing the energy required to generate radiation at a level that would exceed the established standards. Fail-safe mechanisms are installed to automatically shut the machines down should they begin operating in unexpected ways. Multiple tests occur on each individual unit before it is ever used to screen passengers. Ongoing testing occurs on every unit, consistent with national standards to confirm continued safe operation. Additional testing is conducted if a machine is relocated or requires other maintenance. Contractors are required to notify both TSA and FDA if they find radiation levels above the standard. We recently committed to publishing all future radiation tests online so the public will be able to see for themselves that their home airports have safe technology. While reviewing old reports, we identified errors in some of the contractors' record keeping. These errors are unacceptable, and we are taking steps to ensure they are not repeated, including we're retesting those where they had an error, we're retraining the workforce that are doing those surveys, we're expanding our independent evaluation of the safety protocols, and we're having increased expertise in our own staffs in TSA to be able to have subject matter experts review the surveys as they come in. We believe these significant steps will enhance our ability to assure the public that all technology is safe. With that, I'll turn it over to Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Caine. We'll now recognize Mr. Kerr for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Tierney, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today regarding the Transportation Security Administration's use of imaging technology at airport security checkpoints. As my colleague stated, current intelligence reminds us that commercial aviation remains a top terrorist target. On Christmas Day 2009, Umar Farouk Abdulmuttalib attempted to blow up a plane bound for the U.S. using a non-metallic explosive device that was not and could not have been discovered by a metal detector. Our success in staying ahead of dedicated adversaries is dependent upon our ability to utilize the latest technologies and procedures. As the head of TSA's security operations, overseeing the work of TSA's frontline security employees, I can assure you that our nearly 50,000 officers and managers at over 450 airports nationwide are dedicated to our important security mission. Every day, TSA screens nearly 2 million passengers to ensure they arrive safely at their destinations. We use a variety of security techniques to ensure our transportation systems remain secure, including advanced imaging technology, or AIT. I want to reemphasize that while there is no silver bullet when it comes to aviation security, advanced imaging technology, in combination with our checkpoint procedures and the work of our dedicated workforce, provides us with the best tools to detect dangerous threats. Advanced imaging technology remains optional to all passengers who may request alternate screening to include a pat-down. As we have deployed advanced imaging technology, TSA has continued to evolve its pat-down procedures as well as to mitigate threats. There are a few things I want to clarify regarding TSA's pat-down procedures. First, only a small percentage of passengers require a pat-down during the secondary screening process. Pat-downs are conducted by same-gender officers, and all passengers have the right to request private screening at any time during the screening process. In addition, any passenger may choose to be accompanied by an individual of their choosing, such as a parent, guardian, or traveling companion throughout the screening process. While it is necessary to ensure that all passengers are properly screened, TSA is sensitive to passenger needs. For example, our officers are trained to work with parents and passengers with special needs to ensure a respectful screening process for the entire family. Additionally, TSA's Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties maintains a coalition of more than 70 disability-related groups who partner with TSA to inform our checkpoint screening procedures, including the use of advanced imaging technology. We continue to work closely with these groups to ensure we are constantly improving the training we provide to our officers, which ultimately enhances the passenger experience. While we continue to work with stakeholders and partners, we are dedicated to also continuing to engage and inform the traveling public regarding the use of technologies such as AIT, as well as our procedures. We want to ensure the traveling public understands the screening process while protecting the information terrorists could use in an attempt to circumvent screening protocols. As part of that effort, we have worked with our airport partners to post signage at airports regarding AIT on our website, through the media, and via hundreds of press conferences, as well as social networking platforms. Through these mechanisms, TSA has reached millions of individuals nationwide to inform them about airport security policies and procedures. Additionally, TSA is committed to answering questions and receiving feedback from the public regarding their screening experience. To achieve this, TSA utilizes a number of communication tools, including the TSA Contact Center, the Talk to TSA web feedback tool, local customer service managers, and input on the TSA blog, among other avenues. TSA is committed to building upon best practices to mitigate risk and make our transportation systems as safe as possible. Earlier this month, Administrator Pistol outlined his vision for the future of airport security screening as we develop additional risk-based initiatives that shift away from a one-size-fits-all approach at airport checkpoints. TSA anticipates that this type of innovative approach will enable TSA to better focus its resources while enhancing the passenger experience. We want to thank the subcommittee for holding this hearing on TSA's use of advanced imaging technology and for its diligent work in overseeing the agency's efforts to ensure the transportation security. We are pleased to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. We have a great need in this country to secure aircraft and transportation in general. The threat is real. Let there be no mistake from anybody on anywhere. The threat is very real. I appreciate the good, hardened work that the tens of thousands of TSA agents do. I think most are trying to do a good job. They're working hard. They're placed in a difficult situation. In fact, I think a lot of them who probably signed up to do this didn't envision that they were suddenly going to have to be involved in some very invasive pat-downs and doing some things that when they probably first signed up they weren't anticipating to do. And I appreciate both of you in your degree of participation with public service. Mr. Caine, for instance, you're 20 years in the Coast Guard and whatnot. We appreciate that. Nevertheless, I do and am very frustrated by the lack of candor coming from the Transportation Security Administration. The TSA has earned a notorious reputation of doing things a bit different than the way they say they're doing it. It is not a personal attack on you two as individuals. And I know I want to note at the beginning, it is not a direct criticism on any one of you personally. But given that you're sitting here, and I'm glad you're sitting here, and we're going to have this discussion, I just want to note that it is our role and responsibility to make sure that we improve security and still protect people with their Fourth Amendment rights, that we minimize the invasive nature in which this technology is being deployed. Not just the technology, but the pat-downs as well. With that said, I want to start to dive in here a little deeper on these machines. And start, I guess, for instance, with you, Mr. Caine. These machines, as I understand it, were built to the specifications, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yet I have heard repeatedly that, quote, the imaging technology that we use cannot store, export, print, or transmit images, end quote. That came from Secretary Napolitano. Is that true?
The machines in the airports cannot store, transmit images. The software packages on those machines does not allow that in the airport. We do have machines in our testing environment where we do have that capability. And
same machines, though, right?
Same machines, hardware-wise.
Same machines. Okay.
Hardware-wise.
You just.
Yeah.
My understanding, I'm looking at this Freedom of Information Act that was put out there, and the specifications were put out. Let me read a few things. Enabling and disabling of imaging filter shall be modified by users as defined by the User Access Levels and Capabilities Index. Let me go on. When in test mode, the whole body imaging machine, the WBI, shall allow exporting of image data in real time, shall provide secure means of high-speed transfer of image data, shall allow exporting of image data, raw and reconstructed. Did I misread anything here? Is that accurate?
I believe you're referring to probably a prior specification, some of which we've cleaned up in subsequent engineering change proposals. to make sure that those test modes are separate. So you referenced, Mr. Chairman, a test mode. That mode does not exist in the airport environment. The machines in those airports have a different software package that does not exist.
You said the same machines have those capabilities. My understanding is that the network, that each of them are built with a quote-unquote network interface with an Ethernet interface connection. The network interface shall be configured with an IP address, which would suggest that it's actually transferring images, is it not?
None of the machines today are networked in the airports. That capability is in the hardware of those machines. They are not networked in the airport.
So they do have the capabilities of doing it, and you actually do capture and transmit images, right? Even, just think about this from the very standpoint of the fact that somebody goes through the machine, you capture the image, it's then transferred electronically to somebody in another room, correct? That image then appears on their screen.
That's correct.
How is that not capturing, transmitting, or storing the image?
I think our point is we don't save those images, we don't retain them, we don't transmit them. I would argue that's the same part of the machine, and that image review station is part and parcel of that advanced imaging technology machine. And of course, we have a display monitor on that machine to be able to look at the images for the image operators to be able to resolve anomalies or identify anomalies to be resolved.
Under oath, I want to ask you both. Do you transmit images that you have captured in airports? Ever have you done that?
Captured in airports, I am completely unaware of us ever having done that. So I would say no, under oath, we do not transmit images from the airport.
Have you ever done that?
I'm unaware of us having ever done that.
Mr. Caine.
I'm unaware of us ever doing that, sir.
You have in your specifications that you have to have these capabilities. Why was that in there in the first place?
Clearly, when we develop this type of technology, like any other piece of technology we have to do extensive testing, we have to do extensive training to be able to deploy those machines. Therefore, we have a capability on those machines to operate in the test mode, to capture images, to be able to transmit those images to other machines so that in our networks that we use in testing facilities, we have that capability. We don't have that capability in the airports. We separated that capability completely out from anything that's in the airport. And the other piece, we do have images that we use that were taken from volunteers, and typically those are paid volunteers that we use in our testing processes to capture those images.
What about this so-called Level Z access? Capabilities under quote-unquote Level Z access, enable and disable image filters, export raw image data in test mode, modify access level capabilities, download data. How many people have, first of all, Mr. Caine, how many people have user access Level Z capability?
So that's actually a question for Mr. Caine.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Caine.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure the exact number, but I'd like to just say the specification to make sure we gave greater confidence to people that we were not doing the things that people are talking about. We removed some of those capabilities from the Z user access. Typically, those are maintenance technicians, and some of my folks in my labs have that type of user access.
Can you provide this committee the email or the paperwork that would verify that you've actually changed that and when it was changed?
Mr. Chairman, certainly we'll do that for the record.
So when I see under the TSA website, quote, the image cannot be stored, transmitted, or printed and deleted immediately once viewed, I mean, that is fundamentally false, is it not? It does have that capability. It's a matter of flipping the switch, turning it off and on.
It is not a matter of flipping a switch and turning it off and on. The software that is on the airport machines does not allow that capability in the airport. The software in our testing machines is a completely separate software and has that capability in our labs.
Has it ever had that capability? When you first deployed it, did it have that capability?
In those the first, I believe, 47 that we rolled out, that capability was on the machines to flip that switch at that Z user level access that you're referring to. We recognized that we wanted to change that, and we made a change on the machines that are in the airports and retrofitted it to all those machines that are in the airports.
The committee would appreciate if you would provide that paperwork. My apologies to the ranking member. I did not realize how far over time I was. I will now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts for 5 minutes and some more if he'd like it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think it's important that you get the questions that you have answered, so I have no objection to using the time on that. But I don't mean to just pound this thing to death, but I want to make sure that we're clear on it, because it seems to be a trust issue here, clearly. on that. I'm reading the requirements on sensitive security information, and it says, I'll quote here, TSA policy dictates that passenger privacy is maintained and protected during passenger screening. To ensure passenger privacy safeguards are in place, AIT systems will prohibit the storage and exporting of passenger images during normal screening operations. While not being used for normal screening operations, the capability to capture images of non-passengers for training and evaluation purposes is needed. To ensure that image capturing maintains passenger privacy, the AIT systems will provide two distinct modes of operation, screening mode and test mode. During screening mode, the AIT system shall be prohibited from exporting passenger image data, including via STIP. During test mode, the AIT system shall not be capable of conducting passenger screening. Does that sound accurate to you?
Yes, Congressman.
Okay. So what we need to do is somehow give assurances to people that are doubtful on that. And how do you suggest we do that?
It's very difficult at times to do that. We've talked about it. We have offered up the specifications. We've made some of those changes that you referred to. We've actually changed in the specification to make it more clear of how we intend to operate the machines. We put out a privacy impact assessment that talks about how we intend to operate the machines, and we try and be very straightforward with the public, with the signage, and the other messaging mechanisms we have to make it clear to the public how we intend to operate the machines, and the fact that we don't store, transmit, retain any of the images, and they're deleted when they leave the machines once we've resolved any anomalies.
It is the ability to do all those things you just said basically contained in the software as opposed to the hardware?
At this point, yes, Congressman.
Do you have plans to do it otherwise?
No. At one point they were kind of together where you could flip a switch as a Z user level. We have separated that capability, and the airport machines don't have that capability.
So if Mr. Chaffetz wanted to go to the airport, he would see that the software at any given airport is disabling all of the problems that he has or the concerns that he has? Does not allow them.
It's probably difficult to see that at the airport from a non-expert, but we could certainly endeavor to show
bring an
people
expert with him, okay, on that. All right. Now, can you tell me whether or not the millimeter wave scanners are as effective or more effective than the X-ray backscatter scanners?
I can't talk about the specific requirements and capabilities in an open hearing. I'm happy to share that.
Sure you can. I mean, come on, you can't tell me whether or not they're as effective as the others?
So what I would say is both have met our specifications. So we had specifications that we put out, and both met those specifications in very near similar levels, and they flipped a bit depending on where you were using them.
And I mean, I don't accept your answer that you can't tell us open session, but I'm going to for the moment on that, because my basic point here is that you're saying they're interchangeable, and the TSA would be satisfied with whatever machine happened to be in a given airport, that it was doing the job you wanted done.
That's the first statement, Congressman.
Okay. Now, the only reason you don't go just to the wave scanners where there is no issue at all with respect to radiation is that it's TSA's contention that the levels are so low in the X-ray backscatter that it's not a problem.
That's one of the reasons. It is very safe technology, and it's very, very low radiation, as we've tested independently many times. But the other is, it is useful for us to have multiple technologies. As we talked about, we do need to address the threat. Having a number of people working on the problems of addressing the threat is useful to us. Having competition in our marketplace where we are the primary buyer in the world of technologies is useful to us as well.
Well, I understand. I'm all about competition on that, as the F-136 debate will indicate. But the fact of the matter is here, if you thought it was a risk, a danger, you'd just take the chance of going with a monopoly as opposed to having one area out there that was a competitor but dangerous.
We think the technology is very safe, yes,
okay, on that. So will you make available to the public your evaluation studies and make the equipment available for independent testing?
We've never really made the equipment available for independent testing. That would expose it to a lot of public information that we wouldn't share publicly in terms of its capabilities.
You don't think there's a way to do that and not expose it? I mean, it's done all the time.
Radiation-wise, we certainly have done that with independent validators. We've had Johns Hopkins, we had National Institute of Standards and Technology. Just making it available to the public to look at those machines, no, we wouldn't be able to do that.
Right. But other than making it generally available to the public, you would make it available to other independent sources that were qualified to make an evaluation. You have done it, and you would do it again if it was set up appropriately.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know whether or not the materials that were used by the shoe bomber and the underwear bomber, whatever you want to call them, could have been detected or would have been detected by the AIT machines?
Those types of materials, what advanced imaging technology does is detect anomalies on the body. Those types of materials are anomalous to the body, and so, yes, it does detect those types of materials. We have found, we tested against similar types of materials in the labs, and certainly in their operation on the day-to-day use, Lee could speak to a number of the things that you find that are similar to those types of materials as well.
Okay. And one of our previous witnesses testified that the Department of Homeland Security and TSA had basically funded a National Academy of Sciences report where it made a recommendation at the end for evaluating the effectiveness of all initiatives and in a systematic way rather, and then had a whole process out there. Do you follow that process when you're evaluating the different techniques?
I think if you're talking about the process we use for developing our technologies, yes, we use a systematic process in doing that.
You use the one that was recommended by the National Academy of Sciences for which you paid?
We use our process as mandated by the Department of Homeland Security in their acquisition guidelines. We use that process.
Do you know how that measures up to the
Congressman,
recommendations?
I apologize. I don't.
Could you get that for the record for us and give us an indication of how your policy, your standards, and your evaluation process line up with the recommendations made by the National Academy of Sciences in the 2008 report that was paid for by the Homeland Security and the TSA?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Y'all, in response to some privacy concerns, you have implemented the pat-down search as well as a secondary pat-down search for the anomalies. And the Ninth Court of Appeals has allowed y'all to do administrative searches at airports and held that the pat-downs are legal. I think their words were limited in its intrusiveness as it is consistent with satisfactory of the administrative need that justifies it. So limited in the intrusiveness, I think, is kind of key there. But take a look at some of these slides we've got up here. I'm concerned that these are not even the secondary pat-downs. These are the primary pat-downs. Now, this is a child. Another child. There are people who would go to jail for touching a child like that. Do you really think these are the least intrusive means you can come up with to ensure security?
Sir, Mr. Caine and I actually sit every morning in an intelligence brief where we learn what is coming at us from our attackers. And what is evident to us is that those that wish to do us harm are very willing to use techniques which go against our social norms and try to use things that can use our process against us. And that was proven out actually in Flight 253 with the placement of a bomb that used all non-metallic components. And so we have done extensive testing in what techniques we can use in order to be able to detect items like that using both process and technology so that we can mitigate that threat while also being as conscious as possible about the passengers' experiences they're coming through, as well as allowing passengers to expeditiously get to the airport.
And then you also indicated in your testimony that only a small percentage of passengers have undergone a secondary screening. I've had the misfortune of being one of those passengers, and I was taken into a private room, not offered the opportunity to stay in public or have anyone accompany me, and was thoroughly searched. I was not offered the opportunity to rescan in the event I'd moved. The TSA agent indicated you probably moved. That's why there were the anomalies. A rescan would have avoided that. Wouldn't that have been a less intrusive option, is to offer me a rescan when they had, I think there were 5 anomalies detected on my body?
Sir, without getting too much into the sensitive security part of when we do which type of screening, when we do have an anomaly in a sensitive area, we do want to make sure that we properly screen that area using a pat-down. Any passenger is authorized to have a companion in that private screening room with them we use whatever technique we can.
I mean, I would have rather have had this happen in the sunshine is the best disinfectant. Despite as embarrassing as it was, I'd prefer to have stand out there and let the rest of the people at the airport see what I was subjected to. Let me move on. I'm concerned also about the safety of your hardworking TSA officers. Why do none of the officers that work around these X-ray machines in particular not wear the same safety badges that anybody who works at a hospital is required to wear? This seems like a low-cost way to ensure the safety of the people working for you.
Congressman, these are different, and they're very, very low levels of radiation used by these machines, and they're well within public use limits. And there are national standards for when you would implement a dosimeter type of program that you're referring to, and we are well below any of those levels that would cause us to look at putting the radiation badges on the workers.
And I can understand why you're also not willing to open up the entire software and process to peer review. But would you be willing to allow independent agencies to, the scientific community, to test the amount of radiation that these machines emit?
Sir, and we have done a number of independent tests, and we have ongoing independent tests for all of these machines in the airports. Johns Hopkins did the study on the backscatter advanced imaging technology as an independent body. The Army's Public Health Command comes into airports. They have looked at they look at our radiating machines in airports, and they use test and survey methods, including dosimeters in some cases, and they've done extensive independent testing of the machines, and clearly and consistently show very, very low levels of radiation.
I see my time has expired. I'll wait around for the next round of questions. I have a whole other page.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. We now recognize the gentleman from Maryland or Illinois. Gentleman from Illinois for 5 minutes. Mr. Quigley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here. How many of these machines are in place now?
There are nearly 500 in airports in 78 different airports.
Okay. And how many do you need if you're going to use them at every location and every gate?
We're working through what that would be. Some of it depends on what the final capability of the machines is, especially with this automated target recognition software that we put on. You can get more people through those types of machines than you can with the image operator. We think that number is going to something less than 1,800, and the 1,800 has been the number that we've used, but it will probably be something less than that. We have 2,200 to give you some concept of scope. We have around 2,200 lanes, airport lanes in the country.
And is there a concern that you have, if those were all in place with the new technology and the times to get through, it would not change the times that it takes to get X number of people through O'Hare Airport in a day, if every one of those entrances?
Congressman, we're very sensitive to that. That's why I say the final number will depend on what the technology becomes capable of and how fast it can process a passenger. Right now, you see it in the airport. You'll see it sitting next to a walk-through metal detector to alleviate just that concern. We're going to keep that configuration until we know we don't have that concern, and we won't cause that to be the impact at the checkpoints.
Is there a projected time frame now to have all these in place, a range?
I can tell you that we have nearly 500 in the airports today. We had 500 in the President's fiscal year 11 budget request. How the CR plays out, or how the fiscal year 11 budget plays out, we'll see. But we think there's 500 within that level, and then the fiscal year 12 request is for 275 additional machines. So that would bring the total to 1,275 at that point.
You mentioned the new capabilities and the new technology that would be less. It would be more generic, I guess, in terms of what body images are shown.
Yes, you would see at the machine itself a very generic outline. It's the same outline for everyone, and you just see that, and any anomalies would show up on that outline, and that allows for, one, to just do the resolution right at the machine, and two, a very limited pat-down or targeted pat-down. So if I keep my BlackBerry in my pocket, it's going to show on my pocket, and the officer will just have to resolve that alarm right there on my pocket.
But, and the reason I'm asking is if it seems like it's a reasonable period of time before that technology will be available, you would want to start shifting over to those right away before you purchase 2,200 of them.
We think there's a reasonable amount of time that technology will be available, and we've stated a number of times that we expect our next procurement to have that capability.
Very good. Thank you. I yield back.
Will the gentleman yield? Can I?
Yes.
Earlier, I just want to make sure, Mr. Caine, I heard exactly what you said. Have any of these machines transmitted, have you emailed, have you sent anything back to the headquarters? And I believe your answer to that was that you were unaware of any, right?
Correct.
Why isn't the answer to that no? It doesn't even have the capability. See, that gives me a pause to think. You had to think about that. You came to the conclusion, and I gave you a few more minutes to think about it. Well, not that I'm aware of, isn't quite as definitive as no, it's not even capable of doing it. It's like if I said, can your airplane, did you fly to New York and your airplane said, no, it can't even fly. What, are you crazy?
So I can tell you no authoritatively since we have started rolling them out in airports. I was not involved with the program from its inception, and I don't know some of what occurred earlier in the program's inception. I'm virtually certain, but I can't say for certainty just because I wasn't the one who would have been witness to what was in the airports and how they were used in the airports. But TSA has always been on the record as saying, no, we don't do this. We've never had this capability. And so I couldn't say authoritatively, though, from before my time there.
I appreciate that, but just because you're quote unquote on the record, that's the concern, is that I find the inconsistency between sometimes what the record is, and I have some personal experience of this. I won't take the time of this committee, but that is the concern. Instead of hearing a definitive no, it's not even capable, what I read are specifications to say, well, we got an Ethernet cable, we got the IP address, we've got ability to, it basically has all the capabilities that you say it doesn't have, and that's the fundamental challenge. I've taken this gentleman's time. I'll yield back my time, and now recognize, I believe, the gentleman from Maryland for 5 minutes. Yes, the gentleman from Maryland for 5 minutes, please.
Chairman, I just noticed you all stopped the clock for about 2 or 3 minutes, so did you know that? Let me just say, gentlemen, you all have a very tough job. You have a very, very tough job. You weren't here a little bit earlier when I said that, you got to protect the public, and at the same time, you've got to try to make sure you have a fair balance so that you're not intruding into people's lives unreasonably and their bodies. And that's a tough one. And as I listen to to all of what has been said so far, there has been a overhanging this hearing, and I think with the Chairman's statement just now, there is a very, very significant shadow hanging over TSA, and that is clearly that, and it goes to a 5-letter word, trust. And you all, I mean, when I listen to all of the discussion, you all, there's a lot of information you cannot divulge. And I'm no intelligence expert, but I would imagine that part of the problem is that you don't want to let people know what certain things are happening with these machines so that they can get around them, I guess. Is that right? I mean, does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
On the other hand, you have a Congress which wants to know, and the public wants to know, and that's a tough situation. And I guess what I want to get to is, I want to have that trust. I want to believe that just like members of Congress raise their hand and swear to protect the people we represent, that you all go in there every day trying to figure out how you can best protect every single person that uses our airways. And so how would you all suggest, given all that I just said and what you know, that we establish, get that trust back, because apparently, and the more I think about it, it's so easy to lose the trust when you can't give up so much information, when you've got millions of opportunities for something to go wrong. But how do we get back there? Because that's what it's all about. I mean, first of all, you got to have the trust, But and then there's another piece of this is you've got to do things in a way that's least intrusive, but you got to there has to be a level of trust for people to believe that you're doing it in the least intrusive way. So help me with that.
Mr. Congressman, what I can say is that when you look back at previous attacks, even since 9/11, our adversary does look for processes or prohibited items which are items which are not prohibited at the time, such as 9/11. They used an item that was not prohibited at the time, or I think they look at what our process is and try to use that process against us, such as the Richard Reed shoe bomb. They recognized at the time that using a non-metallic improvised explosive device going through a metal detector was a viable way of going through. So from a TSA perspective, we have to look every day at what are we seeing from a threat perspective and trying to put processes or technology in place to be able to thwart that type of a risk or threat, and at the same time be able to communicate with the traveling public so they know what to expect when they come through the checkpoint. So it is a balancing act that we have to balance every day, and it boils down to having a very active dialogue with the American public. We use a variety of ways of trying to do that, including pretty robust dialogue on the Internet. We have an award-winning blog, for example, where we encourage the American people to have that discussion with them about why it is that we're doing what it is we do every day, and we want to make sure that the traveling public is able to navigate our screening process.
I'm running out of time, but I wanted to ask you this. When I heard the representative earlier, she testified, one of the things that she talked about was training, and that there seemed to be, I think part of trust, too, is that people feel that they're treated with respect, that they may be going through some difficulty, but somebody hears them, somebody understands them, somebody has empathy. I think that goes a long ways towards trust also. And just comment, then my time's up.
Yes, sir. I couldn't agree with you more on that. We emphasize to our officers, I think our officers are probably some of the most trained and tested of any profession out there. And one of the things that we do emphasize with our officers is proper communication to de-escalate the traveling process. Just traveling, much less screening, is a stressful proposition for particularly like a family going through. And so our officers are trained and for the most part do a very good job of de-escalating stress as they're going through that process. We actually retrained our entire workforce about 2.5 years ago to emphasize customer service as well as security, because the two actually go hand in hand. We also have another training initiative this year to get at that same exact issue of good communication which de-escalates stress to assist them in getting through. It's a partnership with the American public where we want them to help us in the screening process as they're going through our checkpoints.
Gentleman yields back. We now recognize the Chairman of the Overall Committee, Mr. Issa from California, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your patience in getting through a long day. This is an important panel. We've waited for you two because this committee has serious doubts about the effectiveness and efficiency and authority for some of the things you're doing. I think that's pretty clear. The Chairman is particularly interested in the full-body scanners. I'm interested in the overall process. So as someone who was here on 9/11, who remembers President George W. Bush telling us it wouldn't change America, I'm concerned that it has. You represent 57,000 well-meaning people. I debate well-trained because your turnover is still pretty darn high, and it's awful hard to have that many newbies and always say they're well-trained. Almost every time I go through security, I see training, which is a good thing. But the bad thing is I see the need for training every time I go through. Mr. Kerr, let me go through something that isn't full-body scanners. I'll give you a little relief. I fly more than 40 round trips a year, plus many overseas trips. For more than 6 years, I carried in my carry-on baggage on every single flight a pair of folding scissors. That pair of folding scissors was taken away 2 weeks ago. That pair of folding scissors, if you open them up and elongate them, has 1 inch of blade times 2 and its overall length is 2 inches. I have researched and cannot find a basis for taking that away. Do you have an explanation for that kind of subjectivity? Were they wrong 200? Let me rephrase that. 40 times 2 is 80. 320 times they were wrong? Or were they right one time, and I can't find proof that that's a prohibited item?
So we actually did an analysis on the prohibited items list, I want to say November of '05, that time frame, where we did a risk-based analysis of what was prohibited.
I remember my toothpaste being taken away after we discovered that liquids could be a problem in the British situation. You didn't have an answer. You just took them all away. Then you made the answer 3 ounces. But specifically, the scissors, as I described, are they prohibited?
During that analysis in November of '05, that time frame, we actually changed the prohibited items list, and scissors with a length of less than 4 inches from the fulcrum are not prohibited. So I don't have an explanation for why they would have been removed 2 weeks ago.
8 weeks earlier, I had a 12-millimeter open-end box wrench taken away. It was 5 inches long. Can you explain that one?
So small tools was another piece of the analysis that was done, and there is some discretion on tools where if it could be used as a bludgeon in the discretion of the TSO, then it would be prohibited. If it is just a normal tool, I believe less than 7 inches, it would be allowable. All of that information is actually up on TSA.gov. We have
Oh, I went there. But when you say, you've got to be kidding, you get threatened. You get people who make it very clear they're law enforcement. So I'm concerned about something. I'm concerned that some people think a less than 5-inch, 12-millimeter open-end box wrench is a bludgeoning tool. I'm concerned that a 1-inch worth of point and cutting plus another 2 inches of little, the rest of a scissors, are somehow dangerous, but they only do it very infrequently. And please, as a guy with a motorcycle, don't ask me to explain how I had a 12-millimeter open box that I had gotten on the wrong coast, but these things happen. The fact is, you don't have a consistent system to test. Today, you're saying we're safer. Well, in fact, only a fraction of the people are going through these full-body scanners, and the full-body scanners are repeatedly false positively in huge numbers. Isn't that true? I understand all the good at work and the improvement they're trying, but isn't it true that my statement is fair, that only a fraction of the people go through them, and they have huge false positives today?
Today, only a fraction of the people go through them. They have false positives. Not a huge number of false positives.
How about in San Diego, it's about every 5th person that goes through gets a secondary?
That would be possible.
Okay, so 20% is not huge, but it's close enough to huge for if you're one of the people getting a pat down. You've heard testimony here today that, in fact, low-level X-ray is long-standing to be a problem. What assurance do we have here today that you're not going to be the next fluoroscope? You're not going to be the next situation in which you say, well, it's not a problem, but members on the dais who go back and forth across this country literally 40, 50 round trips a year aren't getting overexposed if in fact you eventually get to implementing full-time this procedure?
The machines have been tested repeatedly to show how safe they are and independently to show how safe they are, and they're tested against national standards that are set by standards-making body who have a host of experts on them, and they set those standards that we work towards. We're well below those standards for this technology, as for backscatter in particular, I believe you're referring to, Mr. Chairman.
I'm referring to people involuntarily getting X-rays or being forced into a secondary because now they've said, no, I don't want to. The elimination of trusted traveler, granted it went bankrupt. All of that contributes to the whole question that year after year after year, each time you find out what you didn't know, which right now includes you can't detect a bomb sewn into a human being. As a result, you're not going to pick up the bomber willing to have surgery to implant explosives under their skin. That's been said here today. It's been well documented. You're also not, well, I'm going to just close with one thing. Would you please report back to the committee the following? Earlier today, it was in Mr. Kerr's opening statement, you talked about what people can have and not have and the consistency. I go through those checkpoints all over the country regularly. What I don't see is I don't see anything that says, here is a traveler's right. You have a right to a private thing. You have a right, and I know, Mr. Chairman, I've gone over, but I know a lot of us have. I have seen repeatedly TSA individuals tell people who are traveling with another person that's being held for secondary, stand back, go over there. They are deliberately denying what you said was a right here today, and I hold you to post, the TSA, to post that I have a right to have my spouse. You have a right to have your child or whatever with you during any secondary and not be told they must go over there, stand over there. You could be arrested if you don't move away. The exact opposite has happened in the experience of thousands of travelers. Will you agree to post so travelers know that your TSA people are wrong if they try to say, stand back, you can't be there?
Sir, I believe the description about being able to have a traveling companion or family member with you, particularly in a private screening area, is up on our TSA website.
Website doesn't make it when your people are saying the opposite.
We will need to move on here.
Will you commit to make sure that it's available to the public at the point at which they may be being told that they cannot have that person with them?
Part of the challenge that we have is that signage, we run into having too many signs out there, or so having a posting at the checkpoint is difficult for us because we have requirements for so many signs.
The Chair will recognize that as a no. If you want to continue to add testimony, this is the problem with trying to fit this in.
Thank you,
We are about
Mr.
to be called for votes. We have 2 other members. It is the policy of this committee to first recognize those who actually sit on the subcommittee first. So I am going to recognize the Chairman of the Transportation Committee, a full member of this committee and subcommittee first, Mr. Mica, for 5 minutes.
Okay, Mr. Kerr and Mr. Caine, we bought about, or have we bought 250 of the rapid scan backscatters? Is that either purchased or being purchased? Is that correct?
That's correct, Congressman.
What's the estimated cost of that equipment? 100 million?
I believe all told for all the equipment we've purchased so far, and I don't know the split, is around $122 million.
For rapid scan?
For both the rapid scan and the L3 for the 500 machines.
Okay. L3, did former Secretary Chertoff talk, consult, or communicate with either of you two?
No, Congressman, he did not.
No for me, sir.
Can you provide to the committee records of any of his communications between those involved in the acquisition of the equipment?
I'm not sure how I would locate records. There was no one in TSA involved with him in the acquisition of the equipment, so I think the record would be 0 from TSA's perspective of.
Can you provide the committee, can you check the records of representatives of, what is it, L3 that you purchased that equipment from?
I'm sorry, Congressman, I didn't.
The equipment was purchased. We talked about rapid scan and there's millimeter wave. I'm interested in finding out the contacts of the former Secretary with TSA, either prior to, during, or at some time of the acquisition. Can you check your records?
Congressman, we can do that. I can tell you he was not involved from the acquisition perspective of those machines any time after being Secretary, at least, and clearly as his oversight of the Department, he would have been some involvement before that.
All right. We've had actually the backscatter is nothing new. I remember at least 5 years ago we had stick devices that you could deploy, or software that would give you a stick image rather than the full body scan. Is that correct? Are you aware that they had that?
No, I'm not.
Mr. Kerr?
I'm not familiar with that, sir.
Well, they have had it. I understand you're now testing that.
Yes, we're testing the automated target recognition software, which is the generic outline of a person.
And when do you expect those tests to be finished?
We have them on the millimeter wave, the L3 machines. We have them in the airports today. They'll be we'll finish up with the specific testing we have to do on those probably by the end of this month.
Okay.
was about a 45 to 60-day test.
I can't believe it, because 5 years ago that software was available, so we didn't have to have and objections were raised 5 years ago, and we were told that technology was available. You have testing in your testimony. Testing began in 2007, included testing and evaluation of both laboratory and airports. When did you first notify Congress that you were going to deploy the equipment and it was fully tested?
I'm not sure there was a specific time frame that we did that, Congressman. I know in our budget request, clearly when we requested the machines and the funding for the machines, we communicated to Congress.
Did you provide any evaluation of your testing at those airports?
We've provided very substantial briefings, and
that was after the deployment. At least to my staff.
And that's possible, Congressman. I don't know that we came up in advance of deploying to everyone on the Hill. I'm not sure.
And, are you aware of the latest testing of the equipment that GAO conducted in December?
We're aware of GAO's testing, as well as the other ongoing testing we have in airports every day.
Do you feel that, again, what this reminds me of is the puffers. The failure rate was totally unacceptable. Would you concur with that evaluation?
I think we look at different types of testing, and we think the machines are very effective against the types of threats that we're looking at. We do daily testing in airports across the country.
That's your self-testing. Have you have been briefed by GAO on their testing?
Yes, I have.
And you find that acceptable level of performance?
I'd like to think that we could perform very well at 100%.
Do you find the level of failure acceptable that GAO has reported now that you have the equipment in place?
So the specific number, I think we...
Oh, first of all, we're not going to talk about numbers because it's classified, but the failure is has been pronounced. Mr. Pistol talked to it. Mr. Pistol said it was that GAO was clever. Do you feel that again, having reviewed this, is that failure rate acceptable? We was going to spend $250 million on deploying this equipment and staffing it, and I've had it tested, and to me it's not acceptable.
So I would like to see us do better against GAO testing. I don't think that's representative
If the American public, if we could reveal the failure rate, the American public would be outraged at that expenditure. But it seems that you have opted for sort of a popularity poll. You said that 80% of the people do not object to accept the use of that technology, even though it doesn't work. So that's the basis on which we deploy expensive screening technology?
No, Congressman. I think that's a partial basis, but I think the other extensive testing that we did in the labs, that we did in the field, and that we do in the airports every day.
Well, the public may accept it, but I'm telling you, I will not. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. We have a vote on the floor. We have a committee that's now run past its time it was going to start. We have other members who have joined us here who want to ask questions, but with 12 minutes ago, we're going to have to stand in recess with the expectation that both of you will come back to further testify, answer members' question. Is that your understanding, Mr. Caine?
Mr. Chairman, yes, it is.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
My apologies to the members. This is not the way we were going to conduct this. This is not right and fair to the members. I appreciate the public and those that have traveled here to do this. Nevertheless, we will continue this hearing at a date to be determined. We stand in recess. Thank you.